All right, y'all. What's going on? It's your boy Easy Bake Oven. What's up, y'all? So today it's a little different. All right. Now, yeah, I used to hear ads run through my stuff for other people. All right. This is probably the first real time the ad is for me. All right. So PSA, Prodigy Sport Advantage Stations, has expanded far beyond just the podcast. It is now a writing service. All right. And at that, a ghostwriting service. So we do it anonymously and take care of your needs. All right. Homework assistant, product and profile descriptions, grant writing, resumes, cover letters, templates, books, ghostwriter book too. Anything you can think of, articles, all that good stuff. PSA the Ghostwriter Solution can do it. So go over to PSA thepodcast.com and you can see all the services there with all their descriptions. Okay, because I know I missed some. And also you can reach out to me at theprodigyperspective@gmail.com and we can take care of all of that for you too. Peace. All right. What's going on, everybody? We are back for another great episode, P.S.A. the Mental Health Podcast, with your host, Izzy Baker. And this is episode 4 of season 7. We've been trudging along pretty good. I'm going to get back to the studio. Like I said, I told you from the beginning, it wasn't going to be every week thing. That was just, it's going to be from time to time. And like I said, now, if you want to pay for it, I go as many times as you pay for it. But if you ain't paying for it, shut up. I just got to be honest. You know how I do. But this is a good episode today. It's a little different, but it's a good one. So first, I got to start with the meme, as always. So the meme reads: the Bible says to write the vision, but ensure you have one first. All right, that's a big thing. I'm really big on that. We're gonna get into that in a minute. Inspiration, being a writer myself, I think most people know, but I think y'all, if you didn't, you should, and be prepared to see some projects. I was hoping it's like a wrinkle. But I'm not finna earn it. Ain't that serious. So it's but I would hope it would have been flattened out by now. Anyway, how writing pertains to therapy and growth, and then a quote by Neil Gaiman that says, Gaiman, yeah. Anyway, it says being a writer is a very peculiar sort of job. It's always you versus a blank sheet of paper or a blank screen, and quite often a blank piece of paper wins. All right, so all my writers out there, you know exactly what that means, and you know how that goes about that. So, real quick, so just an overall just of this episode and what I want people to be able to take away. This episode, we're diving into the transformative effects of writing, and and how it specifically affects your mental health, specifically for my people. I realize that many millennials, we face the challenge of making these decisions in a fast-paced, technology-driven world. And, it's easy for stress to come in, anxiety, self-doubt, all that good stuff. Well, and good stuff, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so the goal for this week's episode is to explore those therapeutic benefits of writing, as a powerful tool to improve your emotional well-being, when you coping with stuff, daily challenges. It's a way about it, okay? So before we get too deep, I have to be a little petty first, kind of. And I want to go to happy hour. All right, so now, first thing I want to talk about, Joe from You, the show You that comes on Netflix. Now, I have to finish the last 5 episodes of, they split this 4th season into 2 parts. I think the writing for the show was great. I know a lot of people said they struggle with this season to get into it. I'm not gonna lie, compared to the first 3 seasons, this season has been a little harder for me to kind of get into. It's definitely taking a different narrative, and sometimes you have to take those risks with writing, but it's not bad. I want to see how they're gonna end it. And maybe I'm gonna come back after I see how they end it, and then I can be like, okay. Because sometimes I feel like writers, we kind of do stuff to where it leave you a little hanging, and then at the end it kind of, okay, all that makes sense. So I maybe have to watch it and see. But I think that it was good to see. Well, it's not good to see that we are making a hero of a serial killer, because that's ultimately what we're doing. But what I'm saying is interesting to see the narrative from a serial killer's point of view, because even if they are crazy off in the head, they are still people. But again, it's been times I find myself watching the show like, hoping he don't get caught, knowing this man is killing people, hoping he don't get caught or duck down, kill him, so then that way you ain't got to get caught. And it's like, I'm wild as hell. This is not okay. It's really a guilty pleasure show in a way. They say it's like that show Dexter, but I didn't watch that, so maybe I should try to watch that. Did y'all hear about a writer's strike? I heard, I only briefly kind of got into it. I didn't hear too much about it, but I heard Hollywood, somebody was having a writer's strike and that people were refusing to like really write like that, as far as they feel like they deserve more money. And, I get it. I, this will go to the next point after this. This is another question that somebody wants you to think about. But like, I get people doing that. You think you deserve, not saying you don't, but you feel like you deserve more. You know you're worth king, you know you're worth queen, right? I get it. And you like, no, I need some more money. This ain't working, this ain't enough. Whoa. Maybe you think you can't be replaced. So, but then that leads to my next point for happy hour, where I ask, could AI take over and push writers out completely? Now, this is what I believe about these AI services, because I do utilize one from time to time with more so help for research things and other stuff that I'm working on. As a great writer myself, I think, me personally, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself with today's episode, so I'm gonna come back to it. But I think that personally, the AI systems, if you're a writer, this is you, you're the writer. I ain't trying to show off my tat on my wrist, I promise. You're the writer, right? This you. This the AI system. It's an atomic bomb. If done correctly. You know what I'm saying? It's like fasting and cardio. Atomic bomb on your body. So it's just like the two come together and it's like a big explosion. And I don't personally think, maybe with certain things, I think that maybe AI can take over with, but I don't believe AI can take over writing shows. I think they can maybe help with, maybe a direction, maybe, but I still feel like you need to have a humanly thing in place, because an AI system is still not a person and nobody can tell your experiences but you. So when it comes to stuff like that, no. But I do think if it comes to like these little these desk jobs and things and stuff like that, yeah. Even as an educator, could you literally Google up, type up a handful of things, say create me a lesson plan? Absolutely. But yeah, it may give you the script, but you still have to, that's it. You still have to bring it to life. It's like being an actor. They can give you a script, but you have to bring that to life. So, and you have to add your own twists and turns with it. So just like that, and that just hit me out of nowhere. But for real, AI cannot take over writers. I don't believe that. I don't, because like I said, they may give you the script, but you still have to, now what if you to say to you, the person, well, I'm just the writer, so this all I do is come up with that stuff. Then what? You could still debate it, but I still feel like it's going to be something missing. And if you really got that eye, which is some people that do, they can be like, something missing. You can fool the people who can't write. But the people that got that eye, they're going to be like, it's something missing. So that's all I got to say about that. If you haven't watched please watch it. It's a little creepy at first, but you can get into it. Now, I don't want to get too much far into it, but that was good talk unexpectedly. But I do have a guest this week, so I have to introduce him. My man, what's going on?
How's it going, Izzy? Happy to be here.
All right, good. All right, so obviously the visual people can see it, but for my audio only, can you tell the people what's your name, where you from, and where you live now?
Absolutely. My name is Damian White. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and I currently live in Columbus, Ohio as well.
Okay, tell the people what you do for a living.
So for a living, actually, I work in marketing to, collect the checks. But I'm a writer, as a profession and side, I guess it'd be considered a hobby by the government, based on the revenue so far. But for me, it's something that I'm pursuing professionally. So I write, I make hip hop music, and I do marketing branding at work.
Okay, y'all, you heard this triple threat. Okay, so now here's the thing. So kind of picking back off, because you seem kind of interested, because y'all, I can see behind the scenes, y'all can't, but I can't. And my question to you is, you heard my spiel on AI. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I'm super happy you asked me that because I actually use ChatGPT at work. So I've used that one. I've used the Dolly, which is an AI service that helps you generate images. And so for both of those, I found like a lot of similar to what you said, they help me ideate things. So like if I'm thinking like I'm responsible for email marketing campaigns and I'm trying to brainstorm subject line headings, like I
Right.
might not want to come up with 20 of those off the top of my head and figure out which one's the best, but I can ask that thing to come up with 20 over and over and over again, find one I like, then ask it to write me the body of an email based on that subject line. And it can do all that for me. And whether like I'm not probably going to use the entire text from that, but I will like take pieces and help guide my actual work, which I found that to be useful. Personally, as a writer, like for my poetry and things like that, I've seen what it can do, but I haven't like explored it as a tool in like my actual craft yet. But
So do you agree with what I said when I said that if you're a writer and you have, it's like an atomic bomb if you mix them together?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think even like when you start realizing that there are visual sides to it as well, and you can like literally, I could take a poem that I've written, put it into one of these programs, and it could spit out an image for me. Even though I have illustrations in my book already, but like, I could do that as a way to help me think. Even like if I wanted to build on top of those poems even more, like what is this image saying that my words I didn't get out of that, and like maybe how can I like fill that in? Like that would be a use I'm thinking of right now, maybe a use case where I could see that being beneficial. But I definitely think it's like I'm moving forward with the mindset that like it's gonna help out writers and everyone else in the workplace, versus seeing it as like an enemy.
Okay. Now, you talked briefly about your poetry collection. So, your poetry collection, I Made a Place for You, draws inspiration from your personal experience with homelessness. So, how has your journey influenced your writing? And how did you navigate the process of channeling your experiences into poetry?
Great question. Writing has been cathartic for me since I was a 4-year-old. I was in kindergarten writing poems, and my mom has one of them on her fridge still. So it's always been a way for poetry specifically has always been a way for me to capture a moment in the world in ways that like maybe I didn't know how to in prose, or in just like natural language. So for me, being homeless was very challenging. I was homeless twice over the course of like 5 years, and 3 months and 2 months at a time. So those are both like very intense. I kind of like compare it to like a football game, like the huddle, and then the play. Like those are both like the play. You know what I mean? Like that intense moment was what it felt like to be homeless. And so like you have a tornado of emotions and experiences and things that happen that come out of that. And so for me, I had to figure out how do I distill that down into something productive and positive versus allowing myself to wallow in the regret and the pain and the suffering of those scenarios. And naturally, I had poetry as a tool at my disposal because I've used it before. I knew that already. It was really just building back the confidence, looking at myself in the mirror and remembering, like, hey, you're the writer that you were before you were homeless as well. And taking that initiative to actually put pen to paper and get the book started.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. So now got a few questions. So well, first of all, before we get into the question, um, congrats on beating homelessness and living to tell the tale because I mean I live in Houston and there's some people who don't make it, some people and then the fact that you were homeless twice, so were you in like a car or were you just kind of like legit like on the road?
Yeah, so the first time I was in a car until it broke down and I had to sell it, and I sold it and I was able to stay in a hotel for like 2 weeks. After that, I was just in shelters. The second time I was in California, so I definitely did not have a car. Was no, was not paying those parking fees, and so I was like actually just in the streets. I was living on in parks, different sidewalks. The shelter there is interesting. Like there are shelters in San Francisco, but like there's only a few where you can actually sleep there. Lots of them. There are multiple options for like getting food, but finding a place like getting a bed is kind of a process. Like there's a line, you have to be there a certain time. And you can
Right.
imagine like the busyness and chaos of that life doesn't necessarily allow for like that to be a great experience. So I kind of like I found myself sleeping out in public more so than sleeping inside the shelter, just because it's easier. It was easier for me to find a pocket where I felt safe enough, there versus trying to get to the shelter.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna touch back on that a little later because I got some more questions, but I need to move on right now. So I'm going to ask you a few words, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind, and there's no right or wrong answer. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. So when you hear the word writer, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Pen.
When you hear the word vision, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Doctor Strange.
Okay. Okay. When you hear the word growth, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Roller coaster.
Okay. All right. So the definition of writer is a person who writes books, stories, or articles as a job or regular occupation. Vision, the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. And then growth is a process of developing or maturing physically, mentally, or spiritually. So I like those definitions, and I definitely think that they cater to the conversation and where we're going for today. All right, so now let's move into the other segment. What does this have to do with mental health? So, first and foremost, before we get into some of my statistics and things like that, you describe your writing process as chaotic and non-linear. Can you walk us through your creative process and how do you know when a poem is complete?
For sure. I have an interesting process because I write when I feel moved versus making it something that I do as a routine.
Right.
So being that I've always used it as something that was for my emotions, I found that as long as I keep it that way, then it doesn't ever feel like a chore. It doesn't feel like work. So for me, like I'm always looking for inspiration. I find myself jotting things down in my notes frequently, just a short note to myself or texting myself something. I have a notebook by my bed, literally, that I'll write stuff in. Sometimes carry it downstairs to the table and write things in. And then, I typically when I start writing, I'll finish whatever that is. I like that sense of completion about poetry. It doesn't. I don't want to. I don't want to spend like 6 months writing a first draft of that poem, right? I like the fact that I can like have this moment, this thought, and I can sit with it for however long it takes and put something down that I feel is complete enough. And then obviously there's a revision process that happens after that. But for me, it's just writing is something I do from time to time. And I think I want to write. I love writing, but it's also painful for me considering like the content. So I find it that I don't want to draw that up if it's not already stirred, if that makes sense. When it's already stirred, when the emotions already stirred up inside of me, I feel compelled to write versus like, man, I want to finish that next book. So let me think about something that happened and write about it right now. I don't like that process.
Okay, so now just for the audience, can you give them a brief kind of description of your writing?
Yeah, for sure. So my writing is very introspective. There are some religious and spiritual elements. It's not very descriptive in the sense of like there's a narrative where you're like gonna have a story to follow. Each poem is short and meant to kind of convey a thought-provoking question that underlies why those words are put to arranged the way that they are, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I've drawn a lot of like common feelings that we have, depression, sadness, grief, and those are some of the feelings. The questioning your religious beliefs and spirituality. Those are some of the things that when my back was against the wall when I was homeless, those are the hard questions I had to ask myself. Like, what do you believe when you're not around all the people who make it comfortable to believe certain things? Like, what do you believe when there's nobody else to validate those beliefs? And so I try to distill those questions that I asked myself during those times into these poems.
Okay. So I have a statistic here. So it says, according to Penn Baker and Beal, it says writing about traumatic, stressful, emotional events can lead to significant improvements in both physical and psychological health. It says in this study, participants who wrote about their deepest thoughts and feelings for 15 minutes a day, 4 days in a row, experienced a notable decrease in health problems and an increase in their immune system functioning. So I think that's interesting that you said, so in a sense, you kind of do the opposite because you
Right.
said that you'd rather wait till the emotions come up, and then this statistic is saying it's best to kind of force it out in a sense. And okay, so my mind works kind of like a storyboard, but I'm instantly thinking about when it's basically saying the vision I just got was like a big piece of paper, and it's like you just. And I think like a photo dump, but in written form. And this is kind of like you write the first thing that comes to mind, just the first thing, and just write it out. And that definitely works. I've done it before, like when I know when I'm sitting and like praying and stuff, and I'm like asking God for stuff, just sitting, and then I just kind of like the first thing just come to mind. I just kind of whether it's a word, a phrase, a sentence, I just kind of write it, and just go about it like that. So you utilize writing your works and content with things that have happened. Do you ever have times where you may write out something that did happen, a feeling, emotion, or whatever, good, bad, indifferent, and you've just kind of set with it, or no?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I have a rule too where like I won't go once I finish writing. So let's say like right now I get an idea. I write this poem right now. I'm not going to look at that poem again until I finish everything that will be a part of that book that poem is going to be included in. So I actually let it breathe for a long time. Like I don't go immediately edit it. I finish the poem. I let it breathe for a while. I keep writing, from time to time, and then that's how I came up with this first book. I did that, and I did that 25 times, and then I had illustrations for those, and I edited those poems for a long time. But I didn't edit them along the way because this was part of my problem in the beginning. Before I ever wrote the book, I never thought anything was good enough. So like you asked that question about like how do you find completion? Well, most of the time you don't, because there's either the imposter syndrome or there's the I'm not sure if this is good enough or whatever the case may be. And so like I've ripped out plenty pages. I've scratched through plenty poems. So my goal now is to like have as much on paper and leave it on paper until it's time to like start carving down and crafting the narrative that I really want as part of a bigger project. That way I don't kill the baby before it's born. You know what I mean? I get a chance to like see that seed grow as part of something larger, because maybe when I write the poem right now, it doesn't fit the context of just right now. But when I put it together with 25 or 30 other poems, it's like that's a staple piece, right? Like maybe that becomes something that's like had to be in there. But when it was just a lone poem, you didn't necessarily know that when you weren't sure how good it was or if it was literary quality or not. So for me, it's really about letting myself write as much as possible, keeping as much as possible, and giving myself the most clay to mold with at the end of the day.
Sometimes as a writer, especially when you have projects, I know, you do more poetry. I see my writing is more so like, book wise, that kind of thing. And that's well, you got books, but you get what I mean. There's
Yeah.
different types of writer people. He get what I'm saying. So me, like I could do poetry, but for me, it's kind of like, I just don't. I just never was the best at it. But I do get what you're saying about the whole let it stuff breathe thing. And I'm a tie it into content and tie it into like therapeutic. So with content wise, I just completed something and I'm letting it breathe. And I say because I was so determined to get it done, and I was trying to. And as a writer, you'd be like, you got to tell a story, you got to push the narrative, whatever it is, whether short or long, and you really want to unload everything as much as possible. And sometimes you start to overthink it, and you just get to the point where this is too much. Let me just take a break, and then you keep doing that because you want it to be every little detail. So finally finished it. Now the goal is to let it sit so that if the least I have to do now is just some slight editing, going back, changing some stuff around, but nothing major. The 90% of it's done. This the easy part, just the editing and adding the stuff like that. But even when it comes to like daily feelings, therapeutic things, whether it's a book you read and you dissect and you writing about the chapter and then what you took from it or whatever it is, I think that you never know what you write down that'll come back later to help you. Especially when you journal and stuff, you may go back and read an old journal. And I used to throw them away after they filled up, but I started keeping all of them because what's to say if something I wrote down from 2019, whether it be from a book I read or something that stood out, or and it really stood out, and it could help me to process something that's happening in 2026. So that's I think that's important for that too. And like how you said, let's breathe, because sometimes what you write never dies. It's kind of like with social media. I'm gonna get to that a little later too. So when it's like written in stone, basically, unless you burn it up or throw it away, it's there. So all right. So now writing our feelings, goals, and dreams and visions and processing information is essential for mental health and mental well-being. And here are some statistics and reasons reasons supporting its importance. So it says there's an improved emotional regulation, according to a study by Penn Baker and Beal. Participants who wrote about their deepest thoughts and feelings for 15 minutes a day and 4 days in a row experienced significant improvements in both physical and psychological health. Better stress management, which this one is a testament for me. A study found by Smith found that expressive writing can help reduce stress levels, which in turn benefits mental health. Enhanced goal achievement. A study by Gail Matthews at a Dominican university found that participants who wrote down their goals were 42% more likely to achieve them compared to those who didn't. I'm big on that, even if it's just having them up in your room or maybe like goal for the day. I've said that several times before. Try to have like 3 to 5 goals a day, just so that even if it's something, and I said this before, I keep saying it, even if it's just take a nap, like something that you need to have set up so that you can know this needs to get done today. It also says for those who may struggle with memory, it says improve memory and cognitive function. A study by Parker Perry and Boulay showed that a writing can improve uh, working memory, allowing individuals to process information more effectively, and it also can enhance problem solving skills. Writing about problems or challenges can help individuals gain new perspectives and develop better strategies for resolving issues. So, what is your take on all of that?
I support. I agree with all of that. I mean, like I've always been fascinated with the fact that words can do so much. You can do. I mean, I remember being in high school and just being excited about words. Just the fact that like when you put something together, it could be an accident, even like an essay when you're writing something in like English class back, you're 16, 17, but you wrote this one sentence. You're like, that sentence is fire. Like I
For
wrote
sure.
that, you know what I mean? And like that happened enough times where I was, and then you start to like push yourself and challenge yourself, and then you're like actually making like you're making your own writing. You're making your own. You're doing that yourself, and I've always been fascinated with that creation process. And I think that the way that ties to the therapeutic aspect is that is the imagination part. That is that is the like childlike feeling. Returning to kind of some of those things that I remember from when I was 4 years old. That beetle beetle on the ground. What makes you have such a frown? The day is fine. Don't you see? What do you see? A bumblebee. I wrote that when I was 4 years old. Right? Super simple, but like I still remember it because it meant something to me back then, right? And so it was my way of like looking at, I'm in kindergarten looking at the bees or something, and like that came out of my brain. That's cool, and I think that I always found that little dopamine hit from that, and that's just been something I've never let go of.
And that's good. And that's the thing, because it's like you definitely rolled a paper before. And for those that don't, well, y'all know I used to do people homework for the longest. And I remember I used to be like so mad when you put your foot in the paper, and then one of them professors, because when it comes to writing, it's different. As I explained, people English and math. The difference between English and math is with math, because I'm not a math person at all. It's always one answer. But with English and writing, it's like you can have, especially because I was an English major in college, you can have 4 different teachers. Two of them could think you are brilliant. One could think you are right. And then the other one think you are an idiot. Like, this is terrible. This is not good. Your writing style is the same for everybody. So it's just funny how different people see different things. And there are so many different types of writers. But let me ask you this, because you kind of said you challenged something. And then you said the comment about, or you brought up the Beetle, which you wrote when you was 4. So what do you hope readers will take away from your work, if nothing else?
I hope that they ask it provokes questions. That's the goal, because a lot of these poems are written out of the spirit of curiosity, the spirit of problem solving, the spirit of finding answers. And so I would hope that those poems evoke that same emotion and kind of like line of questioning for the reader as well.
Okay, good stuff. We'd like to hear it. Okay, so now let's move into my other segment, which still fairly new, but I've been getting good review from it. I challenged that. So, in this, quick segment, it might not be that quick today, but it's a segment that centers around we going with one narrative, and then because we like to, argue different perspectives, which we kind of did that unintentionally with what the statistics said, and you was kind of like, I'm the opposite. So, um, challenging that. So my first question is, I'm gonna give my take on it, but real brief. Do you think writing can be bad?
I think it can be painful. And so I would say that if you're a person that doesn't have a full grip on your the spectrum of your emotions, so finding the right times to write, maybe for me, I write better actually out of sadness, or I write better out of happiness. I remember I was listening to this Megan Thee Stallion interview, and she was talking about how she writes the opposite of how she's feeling. So if she's sad and she wants to be partying, that's when she, like, if she's sad, she's writing the club song. But if she's in the, like, at the club, she's thinking about the sad song. And sometimes that works too. So I would say that it can be bad if you're going to deep emotional places and you're not prepared for what that will irrigate inside of you, or how to handle those kind of that flood of emotions. But other than that, I would say writing is, I mean, the greatest gift I've ever been given, for sure.
So what about everyone's favorite writer's block?
I get it.
How do you deal with yours?
So I mean, I write at work. I write emails. I write all kinds of things at work. I write music, so that's something that I do. That's different than poetry. For poetry, it's like I want to compete with the literary greats, right? I'm trying to be fancy with the pen. For music, I'm trying to make a sound. I'm trying to like give off a feeling, and though I write those differently. And it's interesting because like they do different things for me. With music, I feel like I get to kind of like be more free with the language, where on the page, like every single like piece of the page matters. So in a song, you can kind of throw in a the or a or whatever that doesn't really like matter. No one's gonna be like, you put the in that verse, but like they will in your poetry. What I'm saying? So like for me, like that, there's a freedom in both of those, a freedom and a rigidity in both of those that I like, and it helps me avoid writer's block, because I'm able to, if I don't want to write a poem and maybe I'm feeling kind of, I'm feeling kind of good, I'm feeling myself today and I want to write a song, like I have the energy to do that, where I might not want to do that if I'm in a more reflective, introspective, like I got big words in my mind type of mood.
So what kind of music do you write?
I write rap.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of felt that, but I wanted to ask for sure because I was like, I get kind of like a rock, rap, alternative vibe. Like you could like maybe sing a little bit too. And then
Those are
it's like,
facts.
oh, I'm on it. I didn't know that. I
Those are
really didn't know
facts.
that.
Those are
I didn't
facts.
plan on asking that either. I didn't know that, but that's the vibe I got. Good. So with that, let me say this, and then I'm gonna jump into still with the whole we challenging that. So remember, there are people who've written obviously books, great books. There are people, and I'm gonna go to this, and it's people may laugh, but I'm not trying to be funny because I'm serious. But like, you got good books out here. We got self-help books. We got books that are good for teaching you how to, that were written that teach you how to get out of debt. There are books who encourage you. If you wrote a book about how you overcame homelessness, that would be great. There are people that wrote, obviously the Bible. That's a great book. You got people who write, raps and things. You got people who write bills and laws, some good, some not so good. Then you got people that write, books of spells, and they turn people into frogs and cats and things. That's not good, but listen, they write it. So, they're good and bad to write it, and just got to be aware of what you dibbling and dabbling to. And also you have to pay attention to, as a writer myself, with their influence, because it may have been a good book, but we have to pay attention to what their influence was, because in some cases, some people be writing stuff and it comes from a dark place of pain to help others, and some have ulterior motives. So you have to test that out and make sure I'm really interested to who wrote it and what they into, because I don't need to be waking up, I'm telling you, and I'm barking or something crazy. Now, some more statistics. Miscommunication and misunderstandings come from writing being bad as well. It says writing, especially informal contexts like texting or online messaging, can sometimes lead to miscommunication due to lack of nonverbal cues or tone of voice. A study by Kruger, Epley, and Parker and NG found that people tend to overestimate their ability to accurately convey their intended tone in written communication, which can contribute to misunderstandings. Yeah, that happens a lot. It's been times I've had whole arguments and it'd be like, I ain't mean it like that. I'm like, oh, or vice versa. I said it like this and I could see how it came off that way, but that's not what I meant it, you know. And content creating in general, but especially as a writer. What is your take? Like, say, for instance, you obviously, I could assume that your writing is to help people express yourself first, but then to help people and to, like you said, you could want them to question certain things. What is your take on, and you may not care, but I gotta ask, what is your take on people who may get the wrong impression from your work, or have you had somebody that got the wrong impression from something you did? And yeah,
For sure. I think that because I include a lot of religious elements, it's not necessarily a religious book. I was raised in a Christian household, went to Catholic school, studied world religions in college, like as part of like, I was going to be this is going to be my minor, but I was like one class away from that or something. Just, I've always been interested in how religion is able to move people. And like, it's been a prevailing force in life since I've read about. Right. So to me, like those things, like they're part of the fabric of my language and how I frame the world. And so I did have a reviewer, for instance, that was just like I could tell that he didn't like any of he was very hard on like every use of the word God, or every use of the word Jesus, or if for like those, or like any of the biblical references. So like I have this like reference to the Garden of Eden. That's one of my favorite lines that I wrote, but like he called it like a trite something, because like it's just the reference to him was trite, because like it was, he liked everything, that he liked all this stuff that wasn't religious, that was just kind of like advice and like general, like general wordplay. But like the stuff that for woven I had woven in the religious elements, he like harbored on those things. And I found that like it was a tough take, right? It was a tough take, because a different reviewer a different day could have read it a different way. And so like, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you reconcile that? For me, it's like, that's one person, and that's not the person that's even buying the book. I had to pay that guy, and I had to send him a book. You know what I mean? Like the people who I care about are the ones that are going to buy the books. So I wasn't really that hurt. I wasn't really that I was in my feelings about it for like 30 minutes, because I waited like 4 months to get the review back. But
right.
after that, I wasn't in my feelings about it anymore, because I was like, that guy's either never going to read my book again and wasn't about to go tell nobody else about it. So what am I mad at him for? And also just distracting me from like the audience of people I need to be connecting with.
And see, that's what I'm saying, and that's how and he won't admit it, but clearly what you were saying was getting to him and challenging him, because if you sat here and just said everything that had nothing to do with religion or your spiritual beliefs, had nothing to do with that, he loved, right? Or liked. We ain't gonna say love, because like, that's, but for them, they like me love. So loved it. And all of a sudden, this is stinging him. To me, it sounds like he felt convicted. And it shows to me that what you did was right. And what you're doing is right, and it's working. Because anytime you producing something and it ain't challenged or criticized, you ain't doing something right. So, you know, I definitely am interested in what you have for coming in the future. And that's funny, because it's funny. I love how stuff aligns. It goes to the next point. It says writing anxiety. It says for some individuals writing can be a source of stress or anxiety. Study by Damian Miller said the estimated approximately 15 to 20% of college students experience high levels of writing anxiety, which can negatively impact their academic performance and overall well-being. You could have gotten that from him. That's why I asked how long did you dwell on it, because you could have gotten it from him, and this could have hindered the people who love your stuff. Now you putting them on hold for this one person who low-key liked it, but he picked it apart because he don't agree with your spiritual belief, but that don't have nothing to do with the writing itself. So that's what, and one thing about being an Englishman that I did like was they challenge you to think. It challenges you to think outside the box. Why did the author do that? Why did the author use this line? Why did this author say this in this poem? What do you think they meant? Why did they use the daytime instead of night? So you have to really question every little thing. And it definitely, like I said, there's a lot of stuff I don't agree with, but I can still have a discussion about it. And I just felt like for him to do that was just kind of like, it wasn't, to me, it was one of them I'm too woke thinking, where you may be a really intelligent person, but you overdid it because you got too personal when you wasn't judging actual stuff. I
I
don't know if
also
I
feel
got.
like I also feel like when that happens, people like lose sight of the thesis, right? So like that during that time, I was on the full spectrum from like hopelessness to like full dependence on God, right? So like not sure I believe in God. Like from those experiences, like
Right.
I was somewhere on that continuum at all points of that. So the poetry reflects that. So that's why there's poems about nature and trees, and there's poems about, you know, there's poems about God, and there's poems about me just sitting on my pillow and crying, like humanness, right? Humanity. Like there's a range of those types of approaches to my work, and so I felt like that was not really drawn out because it was overshadowed by the fact that he felt something, you know, he felt a type of way about the certain religious elements of the book.
So now the third one, it says, cyberbullying and online harassment. It says written communication can be misused for harmful purposes such as cyberbullying and online harassment. According to a study by Patchett and Hindua, approximately 25% of adolescents report experiencing cyberbullying at some points in their lives. Now, this is again, what did I say earlier, y'all? When you write it on the tablet, it is etched in stone, especially in this thing we call social media. As an educator, it was a student who had a twerk video. She was a sixth grader. She had a twerk video, and she actually, unless she faking it, she didn't care people, and it was a twerk. She was a naked twerk video that apparently leaked. That one of the kids leaked in their group messages. I had heard about this, and they put it on and they look group message, and apparently everybody was commenting about it because, you know, of course we discussed it with this, you know, and the words, you know, they're gonna be etched forever because of that. And it's just like, I watched this movie recently. It's an old movie. It's called Unfriended. It's on Netflix. Have you heard of it?
I have, yeah.
Have you watched it?
I have watched it.
So my take on that, as again, writer brain, it was a dramatization and it was a horror film, but I feel like it was the message. And the message was, no, you're not gonna die from the girl who came back to life to heal you because you harassed her to death, because that's what happened, or embarrassed her, because they technically, you know. But it goes to show you, well, one is a few messages, and one to show you too that everybody ain't your friend. Because you see, when the time got, when everybody back in the bar, they start snitching on each other, they start throwing each other under the bus. No, you did this. I'm sleeping with the boyfriend. They were doing all crazy. I'm like, y'all wasn't friends for real. So it's good you knew that before you died, I guess. But it shows that how dangerous this social media stuff really is, and what it just, you just never know what you posting and what affects people, because a lot of the people that commit suicide, you never saw it coming. And your comment, you thinking it's playing, could have been that one thing that just sent somebody over. And so obviously I can't play that. Well, them kids can do it. They a little hood, they can do anything. But I can't play it at the school, but I definitely could, you know, give a talk about that. So now, in addition to writing, you enjoy exploring art galleries and finding the best coffee in every city. How did these experiences inform your writing, and what advice do you have for other writers looking to expand their creative horizons?
Absolutely. So for me, like I love beautiful things. So like, you know, and it's because it evokes a certain feeling. So when I walk into a art gallery, or I walk into a conservatory, or I walk into a, you know, flower garden or something, like I see beauty around me, and like there's like the twinkle in my eye, and there's just like the things fire off in my brain, whatever it is, but like I get this feeling, and I just like that feeling, like I enjoy that feeling. So I find myself going to those places as much as I can. You know, for some people that's the beach, right? They get to go relax and look at the waves, and they feel that kind of calm and serenity. So going to like art galleries specifically, I think you're just seeing the best level of work, you know, that people in your area or wherever you are offering. And so, and some, like I was in Paris last year, and I got to go to the Louvre, and I got to, you know, it was amazing because you've seen these paintings and pictures and on, you know, on Google, but when you're standing in front of this painting that you've just known is $50 million or something, it feels different because you can see actually the textures. You can see that, you know, looking at a Basquiat painting, and you can see the actual shoe print from when he was walking on the canvas. Like to me, like there's like going and experiencing that, and connecting with the work is something that I would want people to do with my own work. It's also why I include art in my, like there are hand drawn illustrations in my work. I collaborated with Illustrator to do that. And so that's part of it. Like I want you to have that same moment of beauty if you can, while you're reading the poetry. And I try to pull as much of that good feeling, that good energy. That's mostly what it is. It's me trying to absorb as much of the good energy as possible from those places. And something I was thinking about when you're introducing the question was like, we all have 14 iPhone cases, right? But like we have
Mm-hmm.
no cases around our mental health, right?
Mm.
We have no barriers around our mental health. We don't put up those, we don't go and select if we're to match our outfit, which case today or which Apple Watch case today. But that's how I approach my mental health and my emotions. Just like I have a barrier, like Bubble Boy a little bit. Like I don't let that many people in, and the people that get in, they have whatever access they have. But there's no way for people to access my lowest register anymore. I've made it so that I feel comfortable with my own mental health, my own decision making, my own, like, I feel good. And when you feel good, you're able to make good decisions. You're able to be there for people and be present with people and for people. And so I just try to exude that wherever I go. And sometimes I do let the environment, we're trauma. We have some trauma mentalities that we have to get out of from certain neighborhoods. If you're from them, where like you're not used to walking around opening, like I wasn't used to opening my front door and looking outside and seeing flower gardens. You know what I
Right.
mean? So when I go outside and I see bunny rabbits, I'm sorry, my place now, and like, I see flowers and they're planting stuff, and like that's nice because like it shows me progress. It makes me feel like I've made it a little bit further. It makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing. It makes me feel comfortable and confident. And I think that's what it's really about. Like I don't know where the story ends, but I know that I want to be places that I feel good, that I feel inspired. And I'm trying to incorporate that into every little aspect of my life, from my, in my phone screen. Like how many times, the thing you look at the most times is your phone screen, but what's on it? Like what's the background? Like I've been putting, I did a thing for like every week I changed it to like a famous painting, and I made my
Mm.
phone screen a famous painting. I learned a little bit about the painting. I learned a little bit the artist, and I looked at it for a week, and I just even started to try to gain a deeper appreciation just by spending more time with those things. So being intentional about like where you're spending your time, what you're feeding yourself, even in the most minute ways, I think is important.
Okay. Good stuff. Good stuff. So now let's move into our other segment, which is the weekly sabbatical. And we all know that this is a segment where it's about just kind of like reflection, right? So we just kind of reflect. So before I get into these other questions, I got to start with this question. So, what's next for you as a writer? And are there any upcoming projects or collaborations that you're excited about? Some, if you want to share, cool. If not, I'm like I said, I want to keep it in this, hide it as long as I can till it's time to push it. So, is anything you're excited about, and what's next?
Yeah, so I'm working on book two. So the illustrator I worked with, his name is Francesco Orzini. He's from Italy. He lives in Mexico now. He's already illustrating some of these new poems. We're trying to do it even bigger and better than last time. So we're looking at expanding kind of the visual element of the poems, of the book. The poems themselves are longer in the second book. So right before
Okay.
I hopped on with you, I actually was looking at the first like 8 of them, right literally before I started talking to you. So it's really ironic you asked me that, but that's definitely what's next. I'm working on book 2. Music is going to be a constant in my life. So getting back in the studio, and yeah, just staying productive, staying positive, and capturing moments. That's the plan.
Okay, good stuff. All right, now writing is a form of communication. So it talks about, these are a few things that I've kind of noted, spoke on a little bit, but I'm going into more. It says the New Testament is composed of epistles, letters written by apostles such as Paul, Peter, and John, which were sent to various churches and individuals to address specific issues and provide guidance and share spiritual insight. So for those that don't know, writing is a form of communication. This is one example. And then obviously we talked about social media. And again, and although those are good examples of written letters and things, there are letters, bad ones too. I have a friend. She said when she first got with her husband, her mother-in-law sent her a letter calling her a harlot. So there are bad letters and things too. So keep that in mind. And then writing as a way to document visions and prophecies. The book of her book 2 and 2. The prophet is instructed to write down the vision he receives, making it plain on tablets so that the hero may run with it. This illustrates the significance of documenting divine revelations for the benefit of others. Writing as a tool for sharing wisdom and instruction. And so with that, when you have these different visions, dreams, goals, whatever they are, I had it bad, especially we got these phones. You may not always have no tablet or a book in hand, but you definitely have your phone. And I know sometimes I didn't have visions about or dreams about stuff, and then I'll get like inspiration for an episode. And a lot of my inspiration comes just from life conversations. You know, season 7, these breaks. I take 3 to 4 months off before I come back to a season, and I kind of have the mindset of a rapper or a singer, like they let life, and that's the inspiration for their next project. And really, you can see with each season, with me, you can see kind of where I'm at in life. You know, especially mentally. And even I did this recap before coming back into season 7 on my Instagram at underscore easy bake oven, and I just highlighted episodes from different seasons. And I listened to episodes from like season 2, which came out. That episode came out in September 2018, and I sound totally different. My thought process is totally different. And at first I so bad wanted to erase the old stuff, but I can't. You can't get rid of that. People need to see the growth, and it's still gems in those episodes. But it's just people need to see that growth. And so anybody out there who we kind of talked about it earlier. He has writing from when he remember writing line when he was 4. Like, granted, it's not necessarily it's not necessarily a. I don't want to say it's not a gym because it is, but it's not necessarily like a classical literary. It's still something, and it still has a message to it. So keep that in mind. So we already kind of talked about your illustrations and the people that you work with as far as those kind of things, and the collaboration process and that kind of thing. So with these people from these different countries and you being how you are and where you're from, did you ever feel maybe intimidated, or did you feel like I'm born for this? Like, how did you feel?
Yeah, I feel like I mean, whenever I'm looking for collaborators, it's always about their approach to the work and their interest in the work. So I felt like he liked my poetry. And so I felt like because he liked my poetry, he was going to be able to do a better job at illustrating it. I mean, I put out feelers to several illustrators when I got to the point of, of reaching out. And there were definitely people who I was like, they would just collect the check and send me whatever they've made on the computer. You know what I mean? And I could do that if I just wanted to get something done. But like this particular person, I felt like he actually had his own little message that he wanted to get out. He created the little character that's on the cover of the book. And that character like became a very important part of like the scenes throughout the book. If it was just my brain, I wouldn't have had that. And so like, then that's why I like to do the little reflection and remember, like when I feel like I know better, reminding myself that sometimes like getting someone else's energy and approach can actually sync up with what you have going, So for me, it's like, I was never intimidated really. I felt like I was bringing them a quality piece of writing. And if they were a serious artist, then they would want to approach it as seriously as I approached the book writing process. So it worked out very well.
Okay. So now as we move towards the end now. So we talked about this episode for all my writers. I know they're gonna resonate with this episode a lot. But as always, my target audience, everybody's obviously not a writer, but as I keep saying it, we just said in so many different ways. Writing is essential, it's therapeutic, and it's also a tool for your mental well-being and mental health overall. So you may not necessarily be working on a book or poetry or a rap or nothing, but let me tell you how it's still good for your mental well-being. And also, these tips are good for those writers out there who want to enhance their writing skills. So the first thing it says is to practice expressive writing. It says, as mentioned earlier, expressive writing has been shown to improve mental health in various studies, such as those conducted by Penbaker and Beal, who I done said about 3 times today. To practice expressive writing, spend 15 to 20 minutes a day writing about your thoughts and feelings, experience without worrying about grammar or structure. And popular blogs like Psychology Today and Tiny Buddha often discuss the benefits of expressive writing. The second one says set realistic writing goals. Break down your writing task into small and manageable goals to help you stay motivated and track your process. And it says the right practice at Popular Blog suggests setting specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound SMART goals for your writing projects. And that's the SMART thing that That's what it broke. That's what that's the acronym for those that don't know. And with that, let me say something about that. I used to do that with writing essays for myself and then other people. What I did was so it didn't seem too intense. And it's just an example. Now, of course, if you are in school, this could help too, but this just give you an example of how to break stuff down. So say for instance, you got a 10-page paper, right? How I did it for me was I would have one day dedicated to just finding all the sources I'm gonna use. Then I had another day dedicated to picking out the whatever quotes and things that I thought would be good for the paper. Then I had another day where I could go a little more if I wanted to, but I had a day just dedicated to writing out my intro because for some reason, me trying to get my intro together takes a minute because once I get the intro down, everything else just kind of flows. And then if it's super long, I may, do the intro and then do a chunk that day, or I might do an intro and then the next day do the rest of it, or do part of it the next day. Either way, you see that there is a structure so that you don't feel overwhelmed. And that's kind of how you should do things too. This is a great one. It says read and analyze good writing. So reading high quality writing can help you develop your skills, understand your various writing skills. Popular blogs like the Writer's Digest and The Right Life recommend reading a diverse range of authors and genres to broaden your understanding of written techniques. So when you're reading books, whether it's for leisure, whether it's to, a lot of times I ain't gonna lie, I don't really read too much for leisure. I only read to learn stuff. But I was told that that's a man thing. But I definitely can pay attention. And there's been times I've learned words. I'm like, let me use this in my next this. So I do that a lot because I like words too. And then the last one, practice mindful and meditation. Mindful practice can help improve focus, creativity, and mental well-being. A study by Goyle, found in 2014, found that mindfulness and other type of meditation and moderate experience of improved anxiety, depression, and pain. And there are other blogs that discuss mindful techniques and their benefits. So keep that in mind when next time you are in that mode of prayer or whatever. Keep a journal open because I've seen recently was like we always praying and all this stuff, but God want to talk to you too. So having a journal open and you may and pay attention to stuff you randomly start thinking about because sometimes too there may be something you could maybe jot down or maybe something like that. So now, final question before we move into game time. What advice do you have for any aspiring poets and writers who are struggling to find their voice and tell their own stories?
I would say to let loose of the pressure to feel like you have to do that to find your own story. I think that's not what it's about. I think that if anyone takes anything from how I described my love for writing today, like that's what it really is. It's my love for writing. It's not necessarily, I don't even know if I found my voice yet. I have a book, but does it mean I found my voice? I don't know. I've been writing forever. I don't know if I have my voice or not, but I know that like I love it. I know that it's something that makes me feel good. It's something that makes me feel accomplished. It's something I'm grateful for the skill. I'm also grateful when it's finished. And so I would say to find the values that you find from whatever that thing you're doing is and focus on those. Like make sure you're getting those, like versus like, did I make this masterpiece? Should I send this out to publishers and agents right now? Or do I need to send this to a friend? Don't worry about that. Just like, do you like it? Like, do you like what you wrote down? Like, maybe you don't like it and that's also okay. And then you're like, well, at least you wrote something so you can figure out what you don't like. So next time when you write something, you can write something you like, you know what I mean? And that's okay. Like all of that is part of the process. And I think that getting comfortable with the back and forth yo-yo kind of with yourself as a writer is part of the journey. That's the most blossoming, that's the part that you really grow in the yo-yo. It's really a back and forth with yourself. Like sometimes you feel like you're good enough and sometimes you don't. And then in between there is usually like, that's your sweet spot. When like you mentioned earlier, like looking at great writers, I like to look at that. I do know like those are things that have been edited a million times by who knows how many people for who knows how long, but like right. that's still the competition and cool. Like I'm still writing to that level. And then like, I'm telling myself that if I'm writing my best and I just assume that one guy wrote that with no editors, then like, what's my writing going to look like when I get my writing edited? Like when I send mine to editors, and then it goes to that same like fair publication, that same process, that editing process that these other books did, then I can only assume that mine's also going to come out chiseled and sharp. So I think don't be afraid of the giants either. Like I don't listen to a Drake song and be like, oh, I'm scared of Drake songs. Like no, I like music. I love Drake songs. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean I don't want to like make songs because I know he's really great at it. No, it's the opposite of that. It's like I'm inspired by people doing the great things, and like having those people to look to is also something to be grateful for. Like you're not looking for inspiration, there's already inspiration out there.
All right, good stuff. Okay, so y'all, so let's move into the final segment, which we know is game time. This week's game time is called the Writers Guild. So I'm going to ask them a few questions. Some are like writing questions, but it still kind of pertains to what can help you. And I want to see his opinion on it. So, you ready?
Yep.
All right. The first question: have you ever thought about joining any type of writing program or club of any kind?
I have never thought about that personally, because writing for me has been such a inside thing. I do have people who read my work, like I trust, just like friends, but not any formal groups.
Okay. What is your take on people who turn their life stories, their journals, their diaries into books and poetry?
I think it's a great idea. It's content that's real to you. So, and it's also like you have a never ending perspective. So your job in that though is not to just list everything that's happened to you in chronological order or whatever. Your goal is to figure out how, like, what's the message? Like if you're, whatever your life story is, like there's a message in there that you want to convey. Now you're like taking the parts of your life that help bolster that message you're trying to get on. I think it's perfect.
How do you feel about people who say things like, I know of a person that was like, they didn't want to write a journal or a diary because they said if they died, they didn't want nobody to read what was on their mind. What would you say to anybody who felt that way?
I would have some other questions probably, just like I'm not worried about what you think about after I'm dead. So, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I would just start there. Like, what's you worried? Like, you're not going to have the opportunity to be mad or embarrassed. Like, what you mad at? Like, what's the problem?
Yeah.
So for me, like, I would say that if there are things that you don't feel comfortable sharing, then, you know, put them somewhere where they won't be found. I don't know. Or, lock a locked note in your phone or something. I don't know. For me, I don't write. I try not to think like that. I want to write for myself, but also believing that what I'm going through is a common struggle or a common experience. And so like me writing what I'm going through is going to draw in someone else who has a relatable scenario or relatable, there's plenty of people who have been homeless. My job is not to tell you my story of being homeless. My job is to tell you how I thought about it after the fact. What were the things I was thinking about during that time? Because you also would have things you were thinking during and after that time. And maybe the way that I did could help you or inspire you or make you think about it for the first time even. So that would be what I'd say. Like there's worried about the wrong things probably would be my response.
And so that leads to my next question. What do you think, or what is your maybe a suggestion or advice to a writer who feels like, whether it's a book, poem, rap, whatever, what would be your that advice to them who may feel like shame or guilt for things that they may have done or been through?
I think about this a lot too, because I always wonder, like, what do the moms of like the people who make all these like crazy movies think? Or like, the moms of like, adult film stars and stuff like that, or just like horror movies or like gross thing, like any kind of like, what do their moms think? That's just a question I ask myself. And then I would say that like the power is in the fact that you have the ability to share that story. That's the beauty of it. And that knowing that it's kind of something you're afraid of is probably means something you should lean into. So if you're afraid of telling that story, you should lean into it because it means that there's either healing there, there's growth there, there's something that like you don't even know that's there yet. But you have to get there. So I would say don't be afraid of that. Like my mom heard me cuss in the song the first time, and then like she hears it all the time now. You know what I mean? Like that's just when I rap, there's curse words in my rap songs, and my mom, you know, in the beginning, she might have been like, you know, I can't share this on my Facebook page as a little joke, you know, the little thing that a parent would do. But like after that, it's like, no, I support your art and like you're doing good stuff. It's not as simple as like, I don't like that word or whatever. It's like, no, you're actually, I see you in the studio. I see you trying. I see you like working on Saturdays with your producer. I see all this stuff. So like, I'm going to support that. So I think that as long as you're comfortable with what you're doing, you have to have a little bit of a shield so that you don't allow yourself to be swayed too much by other people's sense of what's normal and what's okay.
All right, we're gonna end it there with the last thing, the question of the challenge. Y'all remember, you win money, so keep doing this. So, how often do you write down your visions, dreams, and goals, etc.? And how do you plan to do this more often in the future? I know I'm gonna be honest, and then we can do any final remarks. But for me, I really want to be conscious of not writing out just yearly goals and daily goals. I'm not good with monthly goals, so that's something I want to start doing and start writing it out, just because I do believe there is scientifically proven when you write stuff down, it does something with the brain, especially if you write it down frequently enough, you really start to believe it. So thanks for coming through today. Anything else you want to leave the people with before we go? Any final remarks or anything?
No, I think I had a great time talking to you. This is a great platform. It's a cool concept. I think that it's like it's fun to talk about things that pertain to mental health in not a really stuffy way. You know what I mean? Like to talk about it in like kind of a conversational environment. So, you know, I've been through like the one thing I guess I will say is like having gone through those experiences of homelessness, like there is inevitably a mental health component. You know, so if you know someone that's been through that or may be about to go through that, understand that it comes along with a mental health problem, right? It just it was a complete flip of the switch of my environment, of what was regular to me and normal, what I took for granted, things that I just, you know, just parts of life you take for granted, you know what I mean? And so like if you know anybody that's in that scenario, then be gracious with them, and be empathetic to them, and allow them to like feel okay with, like you mentioned earlier, like if they're a person that feels a little guilty about stuff that happened, like allow them to feel like you're a safe space for them to have that dialogue. And I think that, you know, if we all do that, it'll just be a much better place.
Okay, so then this is my final question. So how did you get out of homelessness for the last time?
So I got out of homelessness the last time, by taking a bus, a Greyhound from California to Columbus. I had reached the point where I felt like my safety was in danger, and I knew that I had a night where I just heard in my head that you're gonna die in San Francisco or you have to go home. Those are like I just knew that that was, you know, I felt shame going home because I had to face the people that I left, and I was a different
Right.
person before that. You know what I mean? I'm a student and college graduate and all those things. So I had an identity crisis for a while. And so it was very hard for me. But I found a program through San Francisco City where if you had someone who would like meet you at the Greyhound station in your hometown or whatever city, then they would buy you a ticket. And so that's how I ended up coming home, off the whim of knowing that like I guess I wasn't ready to go.
Okay, good stuff. All right, so that is it this week, y'all. I think you may see me by myself next week. I haven't decided yet. I'll let y'all know. Well, you will see it when you see it. But that's all we got for today. PSA signing out. Always remember, keep your head up like your neck hurt. Remember who you are and make your mind up. Don't let it make you.